A business is either growing or dying. There really isn't a middle ground, but even that's us as humans in our life. We are either growing or dying. There's no treading water. The hardest thing as an individual who wants to coach and help people is when somebody says, I'm okay. Like, well, you're not really okay.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites, proudly brought to you by Together, the people behind podcasts done for you, because we're all about exposing other people's brilliance. Don't forget to subscribe to Biz Bites and check out podcasts done for you as well in the show notes. Now, let's get into it. Well, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites. And my guest today, this is one of these wonderful things that happens when you meet people on LinkedIn and you just click immediately. And I think we got into the conversation from the beginning and just said, right, I've got to get you on my podcast. So first and foremost, Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone in the audience?
Always. And I think this is a brilliant way of asking, because what I want everyone to understand is we're just a compilation of our stories. And I spent, and I almost cringe when I say this, but a lot of decades in a different profession. But in that profession, in financial services, I gained valuable skills that I didn't know I was amassing along the way, which was opening businesses, opening offices, opening regions. I just like talking to people. And I thought, when you put me in a place that I get to talk to individuals, and in the financial world, it's to help them know that they're going to be okay. But in that time frame, I also worked with a couple coaches. And it was unusual at the time, but within financial services, they were always doing sales and sales training. And I was so fortunate that somebody took me to a Bob Proctor seminar long before the movie The Secret came out and personal growth and development exploded. But I'm a really good student and I did everything that he told me to do. And I, about an inch shy of tripling my income, did that. And I enjoyed great growth in my career, but for most of us, when we get to an inflection point, it's that something's not working in the current role and we're looking for something different. And it happened pre-pandemic, but it was right time, wrong place. And I discovered that I either needed therapy or a coach. And Bob had partnered with Sandy. I decided I'm not going to make that mistake a second time. And so I hired them. And 3 months into the relationship, they were growing their coaching division and made an offer to come and be mentored by, at that point, the greatest of all time, Bob Proctor. And I jumped at the chance. So my purpose stayed the same, but I decided I was going to help more people have the experience that I got to do with Bob. So far, that's the story.
What a great introduction and story is the right word to use there. I wanted to explore that a little bit first. I mean, I guess firstly the idea of before we get into Bob, just the idea of coaching. I think I'm similar to you in that there's a point in your business career where you have this revelation that you need someone. And is that how it is, do you think, for the majority of people? Is that what it needs to be for that relationship to be successful?
I think so. I think that for each and every person, it might be a frustration, or that you start to notice that you're not doing as well as that you know you can be. Or you look at somebody else outperforming you and you think they're no better than you, which is true. We're all even. And I think when you have that, you do start looking for answers. And it's easy then to have a conversation. It's not quite so easy to always be mentored and coached, but once you understand that they have the knowledge that you're missing, kind of like driving a car. Your parents, when you were 15, weren't going to hand over the keys to the car. Yet we get out of school and think we have the keys to our life and understand how we're going to navigate it and get to where we want to be. So if we can just understand that when things aren't going right, that's a really great time to start just looking.
You know what? I just had a revelation that I hope is not the same. My, have with kids, the teenage years I think are amongst the hardest years. We hope you're enjoying listening to the Biz Bites podcast. Have you ever thought about having your own podcast, one for your business, where your brilliance is exposed to the rest of the world? Well, come talk to us at Podcasts Done For You. That's what we're all about. We even offer a service where I'll anchor the program for you. So all you have to do is show up for a conversation. But don't worry about that. We will do everything to design a program that suits you, from the strategy right through to publishing and, of course, helping you share it. So come talk to us, podcastdoneforyou.com.au, details in the show notes below. Now, back to Biz Bites. The teenage years, I think, are amongst the hardest years. And it's really great when you get to the other side of it. And I'm at the other side of that. I just hope that me and my business, being in the teenage years right now, are not reflecting the same idea where we think we know it all and we think we know what to do. But it's only when we get to 20 that we realize that we have absolutely no idea, and we do need to ask people for help. I have had help for a little while, so hopefully the parallels are not quite the same in the years worth. But it's an interesting one, though. I mean, that question: when do people come to you? When do you have people coming to you? Is there a time that they've been in business? Does it need to be from the start? Do they need to have had a bit of a bit of an attempt at it themselves?
Usually they have to have been in business for a bit, unless, and that's why it's always funny, there's never an absolute. If somebody like me stayed in the corporate world for a really long time, and we get inoculated with this is how business is and this is how it runs, when we decide to go out and start a business, sometimes we know at that point we need help, because all of a sudden you don't have somebody else doing marketing, sales, or advertising. You're everything. But other than that, it usually is in business for a while, because we'll get as far as we can go on our own skill set. And until we hit that point, we're not always thinking that there's somebody who can help us.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? My journey was that I enrolled in a particular course and met someone who I really enjoyed what they gave in that particular course. Had an opportunity to go back the next year, more as a volunteer to help, and for the year after as well, and enjoyed sessions with the same guy, and then just for whatever reason forgot about him and forgot about everything there. And it was only some time later where I sort of thought, yeah, I need a coach, and started looking around, and suddenly he popped up in my feed again, and it just was a natural fit. But I'm interested too. You sort of interchange between coach and mentor, and that tends to happen. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference?
It more depends on the client and how they view it. So it's almost like the word Kleenex. Coaching right now is such a general term that it does become more specific with how do you help the individual get the end result that they want. And they can hear mentor a little bit easier, even though the main role of a coach is to provide the tools, but to keep them accountable. And so some will view those words different. Some use consultant. I tend to think that's not a most appropriate word, because consultants tell people what to do. And as a coach, it's that I always tell somebody, I teach you how to study you.
I like that. It is. I think that's one of the interesting things in certainly again in my journey in coaching, and is that it is, you can stand in front of a group of people and everyone will hear something different, But not only that, they need to hear something different, don't they? Because not everybody's at the same stage. Not everybody has the same background or the same understanding of things. And that's a difficult thing at times, particularly in those group environments, whether it's a conference or literally group coaching sessions, is recognizing the difference and where people are at and where you're at, and having the confidence to dismiss certain things and go, I don't need that bit of information now.
When you go back over and study the same thing, because repetition is really how we change. And what is always fun when I get to have somebody notice, because they'll either read or listen to the same information that we might have done 3 months ago, and they will swear it wasn't there. And the reason that that happens, and I actually had to learn this because I love to read. I mean, if you look at the bookshelf behind me, that's not on accident, on purpose. I do love to read. But there's a difference between reading and just gathering knowledge, and reading and absorbing it and learning how to apply it to you. You're a different person the next time you read it. And so what you just said is very key. You're going to pay attention to what the new you has to understand to get to the next level. And you'll swear it wasn't there.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I'm reflecting on a couple of books that I've read in the past year, and how you reflect on them. Even though I haven't reread them, but as I reflect on them now, having absorbed that knowledge over a period of time, it is a different feeling, because it's kind of like, it's when you watch the movie and you know what's coming up, you get to celebrate certain scenes and you get to find other nuances that you didn't see the first time through. And I think that's one of the joys of it, isn't it?
It's knowing that you're progressing towards the next level. And so it's just fun.
That's absolutely, and it should be. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the point, isn't it, of business? You shouldn't be doing it if it's not fun.
A business is either growing or dying. There really isn't a middle ground, but even that's us as humans in our life. We are either growing or dying. There's no treading water. And the hardest thing as an individual who wants to coach and help people is when somebody says, I'm okay. Like, well, you're not really okay. You just gave up. Or you think, oh, this income is good. I'm just going to stop. You give up so much opportunity to grow.
Yes, there's always something. I think it's there's always another mountain, isn't there? You've reached a ledge. You think you're at the top,
Yeah.
but there's always just another mountain.
Yeah. Jim Rohn has a great quote, new level, new devil.
Yep. I like that. I like that. Talk to me a little bit about, we've sort of explored around the coaching bit a little bit, but talk to me about the influence of Bob. And in fact, I think perhaps for people in the audience who may not have heard of him and may not have seen the movie, tell me a little bit about him and even the movie as well.
Well, and I think to understand is that as an individual, he devoted his life to learning why he had such a dramatic change early in his life. And I tell my clients we should be thankful every day that he went from $4,000 a year to $150,000 a year. And we're talking like 1950s, 1960s. So that's a huge dramatic jump. And he could have been fine with that because he also then grew that to 1 million. But he was very aware that he didn't have book knowledge. He didn't go to school. He didn't finish school. He dropped out, and he just wanted to understand what caused such a dramatic change that he could explain to somebody else. One of his earliest mentors gave him the book Think and Grow Rich, so he always quoted from that book. But one of the stories is that he would drive around giving that book to everyone and didn't understand why they didn't have the same result, because we don't do the work. And so he just started to do the research and amassed, Dr. Ryan at Duke, or Leland Val Vanderall, or Dr. Thurman Fleet in Texas, who in the 1930s was a chiropractor. And where all those names wouldn't make sense to someone else, he was just looking for the pieces of the puzzle that went together for him. And then what really propelled was, yes, then the movie The Secret came out, Rhonda Byrne, and put him and John Ostroff and Michael Beckwith and Marie Diamond and probably other people I'm forgetting to mention on the map. But personal growth and development and coaching really wasn't a thing. It was reserved for presidents and CEOs, and an average person like myself wouldn't think that it was possible. And then the next interaction that really propelled Bob into the forefront was Sandy Gallagher, who's now the CEO after Bob's passing. And what she did, she was the piece of the puzzle that took everything that he had amassed and put it in a logical sequence for anyone to understand and follow. And so you had these two great minds come together who were still focused on helping everyday people. And that's really where, in my mind, he separates from the rest, is that he wanted to make sure that there was a coach in every country in the world. And by 2020, they had attained that, so that this could get in their hands because it can change their life. And the other part that stands out is that he was so humble and so generous, and we lead with value. I will tell a person what to do, whether they work with me or not, because it's that accountability. And he always led with that. Give them the information. Don't make it a secret. Don't do, a workshop or a conversation. And I think that's what a lot of people don't know about him. Very generous man, probably the most generous man I've ever met.
And isn't that interesting, though, that whole philosophy of generosity? It's counterintuitive to a lot of people, isn't it? Because they so want to hold tight to, everything that they have.
Yep. Well, they think if it's a secret sauce, that then somebody needs that. And I just sit here and say this works for everybody in every place, but it's because it's not specific to one type of industry, one type of person, one age, and all of that. And they still need the accountability.
I always find it interesting, isn't it? Because we often use that phrase that you just slipped in there about the secret sauce or secret recipes, and it's funny because the comparison to food is not really relevant. It's a nice one, but I know you can talk about KFC, and people spent years trying to work out what's the Colonel's secret herbs and spices that went into there. But does it really matter? Because there's no point in the next restaurant opening up and selling exactly the same chicken as there. And I think it's the difference is in the human element in any business, and there is no absolute list of ingredients that's going to make one business exactly the same as the next one. Even if you're producing the same widgets at the end, there are so many variables that happen in that. I think it, and yet you hear so many times people spending, I've got to find out this, what's the secret to doing that? And I've had conversations this week with people who are just like, well, I've looked at a few different things and I'm trying to pull it apart and work it out. What's the right, and I'm like, I don't know if that's the right way to go about it.
I'll help you a little bit with that, because you're exactly right. It starts with what the person thinks. So if we think the answer is outside of us, we're always going to be looking. And coming from us, I was in sales. I'm an introverted salespeople, which most people think that's not a possibility. It just means by the end of the day, I just want to read and have quiet and that. But it's to understand that it's the belief in what you're doing that makes the difference, not the actual tactic. And working in financial services years ago, and they probably still do, had a very not helpful habit of bringing in the sales flavor of the month, meaning this is how this person built it. And then the next month, this is how someone else. And even in today, with everything that's out there, it does cause a person to believe that they just haven't found the right external thing compared to, and I always use an example. I worked with a gentleman who during the pandemic was going to do a webinar like this, like have a fun conversation. This mortified him. He didn't like doing this. He didn't. And I just said, then it's not going to work. Oh, no, Ellen, I've hired this company that's well known for this. And I go, you have to believe that the process works. And that's really what they're missing. Everything works.
Yes. Yep. And you know, that's it's an interesting thing too, because part of that is you talk about the sales process, and when you're being sold into something, that if you don't have an opportunity, and I think it is an opportunity to be able to believe it, and
Yep.
because I've talked about this in a previous episode of the podcast with a guest I had, George Bryant, that some of my listeners may remember, and George talks about the idea of, you know, like no trust, but then you've got to move into safety. And if you don't deliver the safety, that's when it all falls apart. And part of the mechanism for getting to safety is not only you as the person selling the product needs to help make the person feel safe and not immediately go and say, oh, you know, you've paid for this, but you really need to pay for more. Like that's just, you know, destroying that level of safety from the beginning. But it's also about making sure that the person that's purchasing from it is feeling safe enough to believe in the product and to believe in this product or service that they're buying. And if they don't believe, no matter how much they're willing to pay, it's not going to work. And that's part of what making them feel safe is.
Well, and it's also part of understanding not everyone's a great fit for your product or service. And the salesperson's role, and this is where some get uncomfortable, is, as you said, our role is to help them make the best decision for them. But it's also for us to recognize you're not quite ready. There's probably some things you can do beforehand, but the saddest thing for a coach is to have somebody decide to hire us and then not do the work. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that they're the proper fit. There's more than enough people in the world. There's plenty of people to work with. We do not have to corner everyone.
Yes, and that's interesting too, isn't it? Um, it's almost like the coaches need to have that revelation as well, don't they? Because there are many out there that believe that everybody should be working with it and should be doing it their way,
Yep.
and that's not true, is it?
No, no. In any role that a person has with what they're serving a client with, should understand some of the characteristics. And first of all, the question really is, who do you like to work with? I do not want to work with somebody I don't like. and and I always say this, and it's always funny. It's not that it's a questionnaire or anything, but 95% of the clients I work with have animals as pets. It's like, okay, but it's a characteristic.
Yes, and I think it's a thing that is people underestimate. I use this whole idea of, you know, values and purpose, because if you relate on that level, then the chances that you're going to have a successful relationship, whatever that relationship
Yeah.
is, are much greater than if you don't. And it's you know, it's funny because you see in relationships, people often ask, are you a cat person or are you a dog person? And if you're one or the other, then it may not work, right? And it's funny, but it's kind of true. You know, it's there are some underlying values that need to work from the outset for a relationship to work, and whether that's a business relationship or a personal relationship, it doesn't matter, because ultimately, if you don't have some of those underlying values, then it's just not going to
No,
work.
I tell everyone when they start, my job is to kick them in behind, but eventually we're going to be friends, and I have that expectation. Coaches hire coaches, and that's actually one of my first requirements if I'm ever interviewing a coach, is to understand that they also recognize, like, We drink our own Kool-Aid, that we understand that we need to do this. But I also have the expectation I'm either going to respect them or become friends with them because I don't want to be fearful of them or not think that they know what they're doing. And so the natural evolution is to have a friendship.
Yep, and I think it's actually really interesting when you say that, because I've seen that with some where you can see that that's moved
Mm-hmm.
into friendship. There's still a respect there, because even as friends, you need to have that respect, don't you, to be able to kick them along
Yes.
at times still, don't you? Because that's the difference, isn't it? Because if you're just friends, and it's a non-work kind of friendship, you don't tend to give people a real kick unless there's something that's, they've done something, really stupid and
Yep.
ridiculous. Most of the time we just kind of go, oh yeah, okay, that's great. But if but you need to have that level to be able to give them that kick when they need
Yep.
it.
I think for me, what was really just eye opening for me, my very first client is one of my very best friends. Now, that should put the fear in most people because when anyone starts a new role or a new profession, and to this day, she still asks, and I support her. And sometimes I am kicking her in the rear because for any of us, when we're in the midst of something and we can't see our way out of it, it's really just the ability to ask questions and to help somebody see it from a different aspect. And if they didn't believe that this process has the ability, then they wouldn't ask.
Yeah, and that has to be part of it from the beginning, as you say, and it's interesting that relationship continues on
Mhm.
even beyond the sort of the professional relationship, which is a wonderful thing. And but by the same token, having that trust, because I think what people forget is that we're trying to pick up bits and pieces of information
Yeah.
from different sources all the time, and those little things will have an influence in different ways, and that's stuff that you can pass on as you interpret it and do it in your own way. So, which brings me to the question of saying, you started off with Bob. How much have how much of what you do keeps to that original idea, or how much have you developed and saying, well, I've still got that, but I'm over here now, and it's not quite
Yeah.
the same.
I think the best way to describe it is how I evolve as a coach and just how anyone evolves with a coach. And there's different paths a person can take. And again, not right or wrong. We're all serving different people. In my world, because what Bob and Sandy put together is brilliant, and I don't want to have to go recreate it, is that becomes a cornerstone of what I do. And in the very beginning, what they really have created was the ability for someone to leave a completely different industry and learn how to become a coach. Because in the very beginning, you're letting Bob and Sandy do the coaching and we're facilitating. Easiest way to describe it. But because it's a world that we love, I sit there and there's no thing about this. I get paid to ask questions. I get paid to listen to podcasts like this. I get paid to read books because I need to expand my knowledge as how to help them and what other pieces of information will land in a different way. And so it's the evolution of now utilizing some of the software that has the training that Bob created and then wrapping around my own style.
And I love that. It does have to be bringing your own style and things into the equation. So tell me a little bit about what do you think, or do you? Let me rephrase that. Going into working with people, and whether it's a new person or someone that's existing, how much is listening versus being prepared that this is what I'm going to give over today?
Well, I usually, most of my clients know. It's not like school. I have an idea of where we're going, one, because of the work that we do in some of the lessons. But a lot of times it's intuitive in the sense of somebody needs to hear something and I don't know who it is. And sometimes I'll wake up and I'll decide, oh, no, this is what we have to cover today. And when it creates that skill level to even get better and better and better is to be intuitively tied into the energy of the group. But sometimes it's to cause it to settle with them in a very unsettling way. And so it's it's a bit of both. There's the process of the 12 things we go through so they know that that's coming, but you can't just deliver it the same way over and over and over again. And it's so, for example, right now we're doing a quantum leap challenge for 30 days. And so 4 mornings of the week, they have to be on the phone with me at 6:45 in the morning. And now part of it is that there's certain things that we're following, but then it's unscripted, all meant to have a quantum leap by one of the best books written, which is U Squared by Price Pritchett. Brilliant.
Okay. What is the brilliance in it?
It's easier to have a quantum leap than we all think. And usually you're in the middle of it before you even realize it. And it is stop asking how things are going to happen and just start taking little action steps every day towards the goal.
And it's interesting because and I'm going to remember that I think it's 10x is better than 2x is
Yep,
the
Benjamin Hardy.
the book. Yeah, and it's the same kind of principle, isn't it? But it's a different way of thinking. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the key here is, isn't it? That when you want to double something, you're thinking quite small. But if you're really wanting to make that quantum
Yep.
leap, then you have to completely change the way you think about
You
something.
can't work harder. That actually was one of the things Bob said early on is that most people think they have to work a little bit harder to get ahead and that you have to think differently. We got where we are by thinking the way we think. Albert Einstein said you can't find the solution thinking the same way that caused the problem. I'm paraphrasing that, but that's essentially what he said, which is true. And it's that ability to sit back and recognize, how do I unlock thinking differently and stop getting in our own
And
way?
yes, and I think that's the key, isn't it? It's you realize that you are your own obstacle, and and it's one thing to realize it. It's another thing to be able to push
Yep.
through it as well.
There's a couple easier ways, but you're right. We're the problem, but we're the solution. Early on, if I'm chatting with someone, because again, if they think it has to be industry specific, and it doesn't matter what industry, because it applies to everything, because they're the problem and they're the solution. But we also have to recognize that the paradigms that we're carrying around, those are just a fancy word for, our parents said things to us, our bosses said things to us, and we just accepted this in broad terms that went into our subconscious. So you didn't put it there, but it is your responsibility to get it out. And once somebody lets that settle in, and it really is, it's a great awareness, is that whatever we were told in school is what we carry forward, or what we think about money with how we saw our parents. And one of the greatest ways to ask a question, because everyone's trying to come up with solutions, is to just turn it around and go, if I did know the answer to how do I find 5 more clients, what could it look like? Because you're not asking yourself, how do I? You've got guards up again. If I knew how to get 5 more clients, what would it look like?
I love it. It's so it's really. it really intrigues me these days how there's been this bit more of a revelation, I think, in coaching and generally in things about how important language is. The way we speak is often a reflection of the obstacles we're putting in the way.
And it's the words you don't speak that are between the ears and your head that is the biggest problem.
Absolutely. And it's because here's the thing, isn't it, that we all have our skill sets, but if we're in business, particularly if we're a CEO of whether it's a small business of, whether it's a business of one or it's a business of many, there's lots of skills that you think you need to learn along the way that we can talk about outsourcing in a different time, but the whole you get into this whole idea that you have to do everything, and then you've got these obstacles that are in the way, and your own, you're limited by your own beliefs, as we talked about before, and suddenly those things that should be achievable are not. I know personally that I've had that obstacle, with sales, because being a marketing background person, you're taught that marketing and sales don't kind of talk to one another. And in your head, marketing and sales don't talk to one another. And it's a difficult obstacle to overcome when you're doing that. And part of it for me, and I think I've said this on the podcast once before, is that people were saying to you, you've got to have the sales conversation. And all I heard was the word sales. And when I suddenly twisted it and went, I got to have the conversation that happens to be about sales. But when it's a conversation, I can do that easily. I can have a conversation with people. We're having a conversation now. Right. But if you tell me that I've got to have I've just got to go into sales mode, it's just not me. And I can't follow the script of what other people might do. It has to be my own script.
Always. I'll help you a little bit with that one too. And this came from David Bayer, who wrote A Changed Mind. And that's what I tell, I just pull things out because all of a sudden it just is going to help my clients. But our beliefs control our actions. And so when I talk about paradigms, that's really what we're working on changing. And he had such a profound exercise because a belief is a decision. And let's talk about sales because that's where everybody is like, I'm not good at sales. I don't like sales, whatever they think about it. And so if that's the thought I have, I'm bad at sales. I can't close anything. I'm not good at this. And so the way that he words it in the beginning is like, what evidence do I have that my new belief, that I'm great at sales is true? Because you take the opposite. If I'm saying I'm bad at sales, it's like, no, I'm great at sales. But it's asking you, what evidence do I have that I'm great at sales is true? And so you look at your own history and you find what you can pull out. Like, I sold $1 billion at the asset manager. I think I can do this. Or I sold and got clients enrolled in, managing their assets. But if I only have one and I'm really looking for more, I can say, well, Kim, who's also a coach in Ireland, was penniless and now sells $3 million a month. If she can do it, I can do it. And that's where you start to bridge, what evidence do I have that this new belief I'm great at sales is true?
I love it. We could talk for a long time about all of these things, but we do have to start wrapping things up. But I guess we've gone around this whole idea of coaching. Tell me, I would suggest that you probably believe that every business owner and CEO should probably have a coach. And then the question is, how do they get to the point of knowing that, and then how do they choose the right one?
Well, I'm going to answer it two ways. I'm hoping that by the time somebody's a CEO that they've been coached a couple times. Because I have a former client that coached early in his business And like a lot of people thought he was like, that's it, I'm good, I'm done, I've got all the data I need and I can go on. And it was from a podcast like this that he heard, and it settled in him finally that I always need a coach, because I equate it to sports. If somebody played sports or a musical instrument, you don't just learn a couple tunes and then stop. You don't just learn how to hit a ball once and never stop practicing. So if they're at that level, they hopefully have understood that. And maybe they just need a little nudge that to be a great leader, you had to be a great follower, but you also need to increase your skill set and lead people. And coaching could be maybe they need to be a better public speaker because they're not able to encourage their team. Because coaching is all different avenues. Um, but I think in today's world, there's so much evidence out there how coaching works. It's why I like podcasts like this. I'm a sucker for the I was penniless and now I'm not stories. If somebody listens to that enough, they're going to start to understand their skills that they need and that a coach will help them. A coach can help in relationships, they can help in money, they can help in health, um, all different avenues.
And finding one. What's the best way? I mean, you're on the one side where you're coaching a lot of
Yeah.
people, and we've talked about sort of the shared values and things, and that's when you get into the conversation. But if you think, yeah, I need a coach, because I had this struggle and it was lucky that I found the person that I'd already had a relationship with previously that I went, oh, I should go to there. But not everyone is that lucky, and so how does someone go, well, I need a coach, but how do I find the right one? How do I find the one that's going to have the impact that I need them to
I'm
have?
going to use you as an example. You weren't lucky. That person was meant to be your coach. It wasn't just at the right time. The best information I can give someone is to just start asking themselves, what kind of coach do I think I need? Because you can go to any meeting and they'll be overrun with coaches, financial advisors, realtors, and insurance people. There's coaches everywhere. So the most important is for the person to sit and think, because it really is, what do I think I need help with? Where am I struggling? And then have conversations, but have conversations with purpose and understand that coaches come from all different walks of life. And it's to ask yourself what's important. Now, I'm a science math person, so very process driven. It's not a surprise that the coaches I've always worked with were process driven and research backed, which most is. All of the types of personal development go back to the Bible. Think and Grow Rich, Science of Getting Rich. But I have a couple questions that I tell people I would ask. Where's the coaching come from? What's the process? And I just say that because I may not be attracted to the person that just got struck by lightning one night and decided to become a coach because they wanted to help in a certain area. That wouldn't appeal to me. And then I would also ask them, do they work with coaches? Because I want somebody who bleeds what we do. Just like when I was a financial advisor, I wouldn't put somebody in an investment I wouldn't put myself in. So those are my questions. And I think it's just be aware that it's an interview on both sides. And I'm going to leave one more thing because this is really important. Whoever you decide and choose, be the best student you can possibly be.
That 100% is the right thing to finish on in that part of things, because I think we've all probably experienced where we've tried things and we realize in reflection we just didn't put what we needed to into it. And and you're spending money on these things as well, so it's not good because you're getting further behind if you're not prepared to put in the effort, or for one reason or another you allow things to come up and you don't put the effort in.
Always.
So I just want to wrap things up finally with a question I like to ask my guests, which is, what is the aha moment that people have when they start working with you that you wish people knew in advance so more people are going to come flooding to you?
Most people come to coaching to increase their income. They leave this process understanding money is just energy, and that they truly can create work and life the way that they want it to be.
I love that. What a terrific way to finish up. There's so many more things we can explore, and maybe we'll do that in another episode. But just wanted to say to everyone out there listening in, we're, of course, as we always do, going to include all the information on how to get in touch with Ellen in the show notes. But thank you so much for being an amazing guest on Biz Bites. I feel like I said we could talk for hours and hours, but as we're speaking now, you're at the end of your day. I'm at the beginning of my day, so that's not really going to work. So we'll have to park that for another time. But thank you for being a part of the program.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening in, of course, don't forget to tune in and, of course, subscribe so you don't miss an episode of Biz Bites.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks for listening to Biz Bites. We hope you enjoyed the program. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Biz Bites is proudly brought to you by Podcasts Done For You, the service where we will deliver a podcast for you and expose your brilliance to the world. Contact us today for more information. Details in the show notes. We look forward to your company next time on Biz Bites.